All right, we are live. It's 1:01 p.m. on September 16th. This is the regular Fire District 21 Board of Commissioners meeting, and I will call it to order. And we'll start with roll call. I'm Bruce Ansell.
Rich Boston. Scott Fisher.
Kimberly McMurray.
We have guests today. Karen Reed is here. Heather Logan's here. Peter is representing our attorney's office today. Who else are we missing? Chris Hollander is here on behalf of the local. John Crawford is excused. He has taken up a new line of work and is indisposed currently. We may have to adjust our schedule depending on what he finds out. I think this week his schedule's coming out. And Chief Ward is here. So back on Zoom again, unfortunately. I don't know how long this is gonna last, but I don't know if you heard what's going on in Alberta, but apparently they've really locked things down up there with mandatory vaccination passports if you go into a public space, and personal meetings with groups of your own, or no more than 10 people from no more than 2 families. It's like, how are they going to enforce that? But I don't think we're going to see the border opening up anytime soon, unfortunately. So volunteer pension board meeting, we have some minutes to approve, so I'll open that meeting. And is there a motion to approve the August 19th minutes?
So moved.
I'll second it. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Chief, anything else for the pension board, volunteer pension board?
No, sir.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn that meeting.
Second.
All right, we'll adjourn that meeting at 1:04 p.m. and open the regular Board of Commissioners meeting. The consent agenda is our first item. It includes the meeting minutes from August 19th, our staff reports, financial reports, and payroll. The total revenue for August was $738,649.91, and the total expenditures for September $837,490.92. The direct deposit payroll was $366,217.16. Payroll taxes, $78,901.65. Benefits voucher, $221,929.75. Monthly expenditure voucher, $87,192.86. Capital projects, $334.47. Capital project facilities, $9,748.16. And capital projects apparatus, $73,166.87. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Chief, do you want to add any wonderful bits of information from your chief's report, or did anyone have any questions? It was a pretty meaty report this month.
The biggest thing, I think we'll touch on the two biggest topics in there is the levy lid lift and the District 4 ILA contract, whichever word you want to use there. The vaccine mandate, I have Mr. Rufato here to talk a little bit more about the expansion of it at the federal level and how that might affect the district. And kind of, it sounds best I've been able to tell is it's still a developing situation, which is why I asked him to come and speak to us today. And the other thing is that with personnel, our fire mechanic John, which is what we all called him, John Levitt has left the building. He's on his way to Arizona to start his retired life. So that is the other thing I'd like to point out. It really didn't make it in the Chiefs. It was in there last month, but you can see a picture of John there on my Chiefs report. That would kind of be my update.
Appreciate that. Anyone have any other questions or concerns? Okay, all in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Commissioner meeting reports. Commissioner Crawford sent me some information. I know, Kimberly, did you attend one or more meetings with him?
I went to the all county commissioners meeting last night, or
Okay,
it was a Zoom.
okay.
Yeah.
Was there anything of substance there?
No, pretty much all the same reports on the FARs and the 911, all the different options for that, on whether they're going to keep it the same or co-locate or consolidate call centers. It's still all up in discussion. Nothing's decided.
Okay. And then John also talked about medical radios or something like that. Chief Ward, are you in the loop on anything like that?
Kind of digging out of a long-term hole as far as nobody really being in charge of it. Chief Noltz at South Whatcom is handling that. I haven't heard really anything about specifics as to medical radios. There's a medical frequency that the hospital is going to start using. It's the HERE network. We're already set up on it on all our radios as it is in the rigs. It's just going to be a supplementary type radio frequency. So if regular telecommunications go down, we have a backup at the ER. That's kind of, as far as I know, that's
I
it
just
on the
said,
medical side.
he left a message, said new radio reports to the hospital, new radios for the med channel. Or is that
Yeah,
the
that's
HERE radio?
That's the HERE frequency, yes, sir.
Geez, that dates back to my days. Did we not, did we get rid of that, or has it just been collecting dust?
It's been in hibernation. It's still programmed on all our radios and portables and all that junk. It's just who hasn't been using it is the hospital. That's who this is actually new for.
Ah, okay.
So
all right.
finding the radio that they had, making sure it works. Those.
Yeah, we used to
It'll-
test those from like North Bend because we always had issues getting into Bellevue from out there, and it was kind of funny when you watch them scramble around to actually find the radio to answer it. It was like, oh, we never used that one. Anyway,
But it's interesting because this will actually result in a lot of patient information being broadcast over really the open air where anybody from Scannerland can listen. So it's surprising that, yeah, and I mean, here.
well, you know, obviously you don't use names and social security numbers and things.
No, but it's just dispatch has gone more dark about what they're sending us to over the radio. It's all, it's all encoded and sent through the MDCs, and now we're going to be reversing the process. So
just got to wait long enough. It all comes back around.
Right.
All right. Legal issues is, Commissioner, one more report. The chief and I met with the volunteers on Monday. I think it was a good opportunity for us to see them and them to see us. I would like to publicly commend the chief for how he handled that meeting and answered some very difficult questions about the levy and other operational issues that come about. I think all said and done, they were extremely appreciative of the chief taking the time to actually come out in person and hear of their concerns. So kudos to you, Chief, for keeping your calm and managing some difficult questions at times. Part of the reason we met with them was to show them the map of what happened with our levy. The red is where it failed. The green is where it passed, and the yellow is where we were marginal. So that red area is really big. Not super dense in population, but enough to, with the low voter turnout, to make the difference in whether our levy passed or not. So we dispelled some misinformation that some of the volunteers had, and I think asked them to help support us, talk to their neighbors, and if they had any specific questions or concerns, to get back to the chief or us so that we can address any specifics. So, Chief, do you have anything that I left out of that?
No, other than I want to thank Commissioner McMurray for arranging. I've had 3 meetings now on the east side, some of those pink or red areas that have been very fruitful and really gone a long way to help me and my understanding of the district and our citizens better that live on the east side a little bit better, as well as a great meeting with the superintendent of Meridian Schools, who they have schools go to the voters quite a bit. So there were some interesting learning points that he was able to share with me, as well as some ways that they might be able to help us, certainly not advocate for it, but get the message out that there's an important measure on the ballot in November, and we'd like our citizens to look at it. And they have the address list. They have the voters that are directly tied to our fire district, and so I see them as a very important partner in this. And I think it was good for him to realize that we're out there, and that that we are a taxing authority within their school district, and that we need to consider them and they need to consider us as we work together to provide our independent services to the citizens. I also met with 2 business owners on the east side, once again arranged by Commissioner McMurray, and very nice gentleman that took the time to listen, and I was able to tell the story and see their reaction on some things that they didn't realize. And I made the comment that all I need to do is sit down and talk with all 30,000 people that live in our district, and we should be able to make this go no problem. So there's a lot of whether you call them wives' tales about the fire department, or just or non-understanding how municipal finance works and where the money actually goes, that your tax funds stay here in Whatcom County. They stay in the district. They don't go to Olympia. They don't go to DC. Those kind of things were just ideas that they didn't know about. They didn't know that they thought we fight for a piece of pie, just like a city. That the taxes go to the county and then we fight for a piece of the pie, and that's not true. So both of these gentlemen have, I would say, they're able to cast a pretty wide net. Did not get, hey, yeah, we're going to support you. Where can I get a sign? But I now have a couple gentlemen who are willing to take a look at what we put out before we, take a look at the information, our outlook, our outreach documentation and paperwork, and look at it with a critical eye, through a lens that maybe one of us doesn't use. And so I think that's completely invaluable. And I thank Commissioner McMurray for her time, her effort at getting those meetings together. And yeah, it's been great. So No pressure, other commissioners.
Okay.
All right.
Commissioner Ansel, Heather Logan's got something to add just real
Oh,
quick.
I'm sorry, Heather, go ahead.
Commissioner and Chief, I'm curious with your volunteers if the disinformation that you dealt with was similar to the items you just rattled off. And the reason I'm asking is, we haven't finalized a mailer yet. And if there's language we need to change or remove, better to know today than next week.
Yeah, there was some that was similar and some that was, and some, like I said, kind of wives' tales or inferred knowledge. Does that make sense? So they thought they knew where we were going with something and they just guessed. And
Yeah.
it was, and so that tells me that the clarity of things, some things needs to be, some of the message needs to be more clear or broken down in a different way.
Okay.
So yeah,
But,
I would.
We also heard a couple of times, well, I had a question about that, but I didn't ask anybody, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like, I'll just vote no because I don't know, rather than I can go to the website and get that answer. I can call the fire chief or I can call Bruce or whatever, but they just like, well, I really didn't know. Or someone asked me that, but I couldn't answer it. And I'm like, geez, come on, guys. Let's go. I think there was a lot of misunderstanding of how the whole taxing system works, i.e., my property value doubled. How come your budget hasn't doubled, sort of thing? And trying to explain that whole 1%, it's hard for people to grasp that when, if the value of their house doubled, which means that their property taxes went up significantly or a large percentage, how come we can't live on that? And so we kind of had to draw out, well, in a $6 million budget, that's $60,000. I mean, we just spent $12,000 to put tires on a couple vehicles, I mean, that $60,000 doesn't go very far. Even though, you as a property owner think you've gone up. So we did a lot of that. What happened to the $1.50 and where's it at and what's going to happen to our $1.45 and how it's going to diminish over time. It was good, but I don't know how you reach the average person and explain that to them, because it's taken me about 6 years to figure it out. So I think I don't know. It's a tough message to get out there to say we get 1%. It's not enough to even pay the gas bill.
Right. Well, it's also a group of voters that hasn't had to think about it in at least 12 years.
Right.
So they're not even used to picking up the phone or checking the internet. It just has been invisible to them.
Right. And, unfortunately, this whole COVID thing has made it more difficult for us to get our message out.
Yes.
We can't have open houses and town meetings and stuff like that. It's real hard to access a group of people. And then there are some vocal, outspoken blogs, websites, etc., that get people worked up, and those are hard to overcome. It's a new era of communication. I don't know. We can't just expect that, well, the fire department's the good guys, we're always going to vote for what they want.
Right.
So,
Thank you for the information.
sure. Mr. Rufato, you are representing our attorneys today, and thank you for being here. Do you have any updates for us on the, I guess, COVID requirements for either vaccination or
Yeah, thank you.
accommodations?
Yeah, thank you. And nice to meet you, commissioners and chief and staff. I hope to meet you in person someday. My name is Peter Rufato. I work in the Schmelik, Sicken and Davis law firm. And I do have some information. So what this is focused on, and if you need to redirect where my bullet points go, feel free to do so. But this is focused on, now we've had the state proclamation. There's been a lot of discussion about that. Now we have the Biden order at the federal level. And I'll just go through some bullet points on that. And the major footnote I would provide is that, as we see with a lot of these proclamations, you get the proclamation first, or sometimes you get a press release first. Then you might get a proclamation which gives you a little more detail. And then sometimes the agencies actually start rolling out the specifics about how this is going to go. And so that's what we have in this case. I'll just go through some bullet points, and I apologize for my backdrop. I'm on my way back to Bellingham. I'm on the east side of the mountains right now. Normally I don't have a bunk bed at my side.
I was going to say, you spend a lot of time in your office.
They don't work me quite that hard, but so just going through some of those bullet points. So on September 9th, President Biden announced that he's directing the Department of Labor to require all businesses with 100 or more employees to ensure that their workers are either vaccinated or tested once a week. And of course, this is a minimum standard. Employers, it was communicated, can choose to have more strict requirements. Employers will be required to give their workers paid time off to get vaccinated and or to recover from the effects of the vaccine. If businesses don't comply, they're subject to fines of up to $13,600 per violation. There are limited exemptions, and this will sound familiar to you because you've been through this at the state level. Exemptions, accommodations include the medical reason, as well as sincerely held religious beliefs. And now, again, we expect in the next 2 to 3 weeks for the Department of Labor, in conjunction with OSHA, to issue further rules to really implement this. And so what we have right now, I was on the website this morning, it's fairly general and broad, and it's basically these bullet points that I'm giving you, but we don't have some of the detail yet. So continuing on with what we do know, this also requires all federal governmental workers to be vaccinated with no option to be tested as an opt-out. So the testing is not an option there. Employees of contractors that do business with the federal government must be vaccinated with no testing alternative. And that will only apply to new contracts entered into after October 15th, 2021, and contracts extended after that date.
Do you know whether the contract, does that apply to just, I got money from the federal government, or is it something more precise than that?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to wait for that additional guidance on that. I know that it seems a little bit like on the state side of things. I know a lot of at the state proclamation level, a lot of our public entity clients are getting notices about, okay, now you have this contract for on-site work, and then that raises this question, well, what are we going to see at the federal level? I don't know the answer to your question about whether it's any kind of contract. When I think about fire districts, or at least on the medical side, I think about Medicare and Medicaid and all that. But anyway, so I think that remains to be seen. That's a good question. So one of the notes that I have here is, if you are considered a federal contractor, again, you will not have the option to allow testing in lieu of vaccination. Employees at healthcare facilities that accept, and this gets to that point, that accept Medicare or Medicaid reimbursement must be vaccinated with no testing alternative.
So
Okay,
does that include fire districts then? I mean, if we are getting some reimbursements?
I think we'll have to wait a little bit on the guidance from the federal government. I think that's not a workplace-based restriction, so that'll probably come out of on the health side of things for further fleshing that out in the implementing regulations. But we'll be paying attention to that. And I apologize, I don't have some of the detailed answers. But that question arose in my mind too, as I was going through the bullet points that we know and knowing I was going to be talking to you today. Don't know the answer to that for sure. We don't know if, for example, in the OSHA context, whether this will apply to employees that are working remotely. We don't know the answer to that yet. We also don't know if employers will be required to pay employees for time spent getting the vaccine or recovering from side effects if they're on non-work time. So I mentioned that there is a requirement that you have to provide paid time, but let's say someone goes in on their own time, is there going to be a requirement that has to be reimbursed somehow? There's a question about who pays for weekly COVID-19, the testing. That hasn't been fleshed out. We don't know what the deadline is going to be for when folks have to be vaccinated for those that, we know what that is obviously on the state side, but we don't on the federal side. And then we do have those same exemptions or accommodations. We have, disability or medical reason or religious. We don't know if the standard at the federal level, whether they'll articulate the requirements in the same way. I expect it to be very similar, but that's still an open question. So I apologize. This is in very much bullet point fashion. Don't have a lot of detail. We'll be paying attention to this. And, as with everything over the last year and a half, like I said, we get the announcement and then we get some detail and then the rules come down later is kind of how this seems to work. That's all I have for you. And so one question I do have, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. And then I don't know what your practice is whether you want me to stay on. I'm happy to stay on the meeting, or if I don't want to overstay my welcome either. So,
Chief, it's up to you. We've got a resolution coming up and a draft vaccine COVID policy for us, but I don't know that. I think you addressed one of my questions in that policy was the compensation piece of what are employees entitled to if they are mandated by their employers to get vaccinated, and I think you answered that. Or what's the industry standard going to be to sort of soften this blow a little bit? We're fortunate in our district going to be 100% compliant. So that's amazing considering what's kind of I'm hearing from around the state. Our district and Duval District 45 are the only two I currently know of that are going to be 100% vaccinated. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to our neighbors here. And then also we've got the volunteer piece. Do you have any thoughts on what's going to happen with our volunteer group?
I don't. The one thing I did make a note of, it looked like from your website this morning, again, I'm not as familiar with you as Richard is, your operation, but it looks like you have under 100, even if you include your volunteers. What I didn't see is, and I haven't seen any guidance yet, how volunteers will be factored into that, if they will be. But again, it sounds like you're under 100 either way. So then you get into the health side. There's different ways that you can be sort of tagged for when you're required. One is the 100 employee, the other is this contract basis with the federal government, and I don't know how they're going to treat volunteers. I don't know how that's going to come out when OSHA or whichever federal agency is applicable is going to put out the implementing rules.
So if our volunteers aren't engaging in EMS work, does that change the bar a little bit? Obviously, if we're receiving the funds, it's probably a moot point, but assuming we get around that hurdle, if they, for instance, most of our volunteers are part of the tender group, if they're not engaged in EMS, and correct me if I'm going down the wrong path here, Chief, I'm sure some of them or many of them are EMTs, but are they practicing, and does that exempt them if they're only in a tender group?
That was my reasoning for wanting to have an attorney present that could answer, help us answer some of these questions. Because what I've seen since Monday is, and I guess I term it the goalpost key, or the end zone keeps moving. That it went from the state mandate went for medical licenses. If you were not vaccinated, you could not continue to operate under your license with Department of Health. And then President Biden's order came out, and by Monday, the word I was reading and getting was that if you are a agency that receives Medicare, Medicaid funding, to include GEMT funds, that it was everyone from CEO down to the custodian was going to be required to be vaccinated. And just the way that we saw the state mandate change from everybody, like I said, everybody that had a license with the Department of Health, and then it was anybody entering a place that healthcare is provided. So it all of a sudden are mechanics, because they go inside of an ambulance to repair it, not on the scene, not when a patient's inside of it, yet they go into an ambulance. We were advised by legal that, yep, and not just our legal, but state chiefs and commissioners as well, association as well, said that nope, they are folded in under this mandate and they need to be vaccinated as well. So in watching it, like I said, I see the words Medicare, Medicaid, GEMT funds, and I start to think, well, our tender group is pretty integral to our operation here. And if they need to be vaccinated, then we need to start preparing them, let them know that that's a requirement, and they'll have to make their decision. Because we may be blessed to have 100% of our FTEs vaccinated, but losing a portion of the tender group would be detrimental to our operation. So that's why I had Mr. Rufato come. Between Monday and today, things have changed, and sorry for the slow rollout. I didn't realize it would be that slow. I was hoping by Thursday we'd have some better word, but it sounds like it's just going to take a bit for things to make its way through the alphabet soup that is DC and before it gets out here. So
I would just say that the general, as the chief said, the general seems like the general trend is they cast as broad a net as possible. And so the discussion about whether volunteers or employees are engaging in healthcare is not the driver for some of these. Some of these are just purely to get as widespread as possible. That's how I'm reading this. So I have the bullet point in front of me that I think is taken from the federal information we have so far. Employees at healthcare facilities that accept Medicare or Medicaid reimbursement must be vaccinated, no testing alternative. My guess is that they haven't thought about volunteers yet. And so we'll have to wait and see what the definition of employee is.
All right, stay tuned. Thank you for your time. I don't know that, Chief, we will need.
No, I think since this will be releasing the draft policy to you. If there was questions about it, we would definitely have Mr. Davis or Mr. Rafato back before approval of the policy. So I think Mr. Rafato is good to step out if he wishes.
Thank
I have
you
a
for
question.
your time. It was nice
I have a
meeting you as
question.
well.
I have a question before you leave, Peter. I'm hearing at the state level there, rather than giving exemptions to some employees or especially volunteers, they're giving accommodations. Has that term come up at all in anything you run across?
Yeah, well, I think when I hear exemption, I think of accommodation. I think of those two as one and the same, unless I'm not understanding your question. But in general, you can call it exception, exemption, accommodation, but it's basically saying you don't have to get a vaccine if, one, you can come forward and show a disability or medical reason, and then there's an interactive process. And I see that this is what's outlined, I think, in your policy, proposed policy. And so that's one way. The second way is the religious, sincerely held belief. I think of the exemption and the accommodation as the same. They both envision a process and some documentation, and then to see if there can be some accommodation made. Does that answer the question?
Well, kind of yes and no. Some are seeing them as two different positions. One is an exemption and the other is an accommodation. So it puts some employee or some volunteers in a difficult position because they don't want an accommodation, which is kind of like an exemption, but that's what the state is giving them. And some of them are even making an accommodation a different job duty where you're not in contact with people. So, and like you say, it changes from one day to another. So who knows? I think you just have to make a policy and go with it because it's going to be outdated probably a week later.
And Commissioner Bossman, I did assure the volunteer group that, we're going to follow all applicable laws and, ADA requirements as far as accommodations go. And that unless it sounds like maybe in Mr. Biden's order that there's been that's not been considered, but if it is, obviously we're going to consider all those things in our.
Yeah, just to be clear, I think it is included in the federal.
Okay.
What we have from the federal government so far. I just don't know if it'll be articulated the same exact way.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Next item is the local
Thank you.
106 report. Chris, put you on the spot here. I don't know if you were given any script to read off of today or if you had anything for us, but this is your moment.
Or I am fully prepared for this moment. Scott left it in good hands. Number one for us, obviously this levy, we're pushing to get it passed. We got door knocking, flag waving, and we're ready to start going on that and get the word out. Has been mentioned already. I believe we are going to be 100% vaccinated for everybody in the local. We just wanted to mention that Keith's retirement, Keith Zylstra, we wanted to congratulate him and thank him for his years of service, as well as Mechanic John. Both of them will be missed. And then just from the union side to congratulate both Danny Jensen and Troy Freeman on their promotion to lieutenant. So that's what we're working on right now. Our number one priority is going to be that levy.
All right. Do you guys have a schedule or anything out as far as when people are going to be hitting the streets?
Not that I'm aware of an actual date, but we'll let you know as soon as we do. It's going to be soon before the ballots, go out.
I was going to just remind you the election is in November early.
We're aware. We're pushing.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unfinished business, levy lid lift, as long as we're kind of dancing around that topic. Chief or Heather or Karen, I don't know if you've got any updates for us. I know we've been batting around some question and answer stuff recently, and what's our rollout plan?
Well, obviously we have the two subject matter experts here. We've been hard at work both on the D21 side and on the D4 side. Focus on the D21 side because that's where we're at today. Yeah, there's FAQs. We're batting around FAQs. We put out a supplemental newsletter that people received, and the first draft of the flyer came out today. But to kind of get into the nitty gritty, I'm going to leave it up to Karen and Heather to kind of more focused talk.
Go ahead, Heather.
So,
Yeah.
I'll do it
Nice.
if you don't want to.
Nice
the
cunt.
mailer, we've taken a, depending on which one of us you ask, a grittier or a darker tone with this round of communication. The first campaign, we tried just the benefits with the idea that, gosh, everyone supports fire. And clearly we met our Waterloo in northern Whatcom County. So this time around, for example, the FAQs are dramatically longer. We have a new one out, whether or not to publicize how the surveying and rating board works and why your home premiums might go up if you don't vote for the levy. We have to be very careful with our language, but it's an FAQ that might make the list. The mailer has gotten bigger. It's a bigger piece of paper that's going to fold because we have whole sections of the additional benefits, the risks, how the money works. It's bright, it's colorful. We have I think we got it just a couple hours ago, the first draft of it. But the biggest change is definitely the grittier or darker tone and the focus is time. We need time to get to you in your emergency, and we are out of time to continue to function at this level without additional funding because it's been this many years, because we're capped at 1%, because everything we own is old. We need more funding. And if you don't agree with us, we're very concerned that service levels and response times are going to erode. And so that's very much the tone of the new materials. Does anyone have questions or concerns about that?
I unfortunately believe it's a time for a reality check, and you know, as much as we were taking the high road and not trying to scare people, I think they need to be scared, because that's my fear is if they don't vote for it and then our service erodes, I'll bet you we'll be seeing all kinds of people coming to our meetings asking us why their house burnt down, or why we didn't get the aid car there on time, or, you know, why there was no one to respond. And
Right.
I don't know how you send that message preemptively for people to understand. It's almost like you've got to wait for it to hit the fan before they actually respond. And I hope part of the reason we didn't pass was just voter turnout, but we lost by 675 votes or so. And a strong contingent of no's east of the freeway. So it's a lot of area out there.
Yeah, all true. And that's why the darker tone, because there are personal consequences. Nobody wants raised taxes. I'm kind of liberal myself, and I don't want raised taxes. And but the thing is, you can make that decision, and then the consequence might be that they don't get to your mom and her broken hip in time. You know, it becomes personal, and we're trying to warn them without scaring the bejesus out of them. And stay legal. We can only educate, we cannot advocate.
Right. And I mean, I think the potential downside is, I mean, you know, I contacted my insurance broker and asked what happens if our rating is is downgraded, and the cost of that downgrade is more than the cost of the levy. So
Taxes. Yeah,
it's like, do you want to have poor service and higher homeowners, or do you want to have good service and lower homeowners? To me, it's a no-brainer, but it's hard to get people to get that message. So it's almost, that's something that happens after the fact, and they're like, well, you didn't tell me that was going to happen. It's like,
right.
I
Right.
think, I think you have to be really careful with the wording. If you're trying to figure out the demeanor of the people east of the freeway who voted against it, it would be an interesting correlation between those who voted against it and those who don't want any tax rate of any kind, and those who are anti-vaccine. And those people are kind of tired of being told what to do. So if you tell them you have to vote for this, might not resonate as well as, this is what you can do. These are what the options are. It's your choice. Rather than saying, you have to do this. If you don't, we're not going to get there in time. Do you follow where I'm headed on this?
Oh, absolutely. And we have towed that line specifically because we cannot say that kind of thing to them. You must, or thou shalt. It just lays out the facts of what has happened to funding over time, what the needs in the department are, how there hasn't been an increase in 12 years, and that the concern is that service levels will erode. It's not threatening. It's very frank.
And Commissioner Bossman, it's gone from a, hey, this is what we want to do, kind of a,
Yeah.
pie in the sky.
Pie in the sky, to hey, this is where we're at.
Yeah.
And we want to keep things where they are and make a couple little improvements. But we're not doing the, nobody's coming. It's
No.
just one of the things that was interesting. Heather and Jenny were working on that supplemental flyer, the supplemental newsletter. Thank you. And went and did the average age of our rigs, and our tender fleet, which responds to the east side, which brings water to homes that are on fire on the east side. It's our sole source of water on the east side. The average age is 27.5 years old.
Get that in the FAQ, Heather. I missed that one.
So,
no, it's one of the things we need to incorporate, but it is in the special edition newsletter that went out.
yeah, it's in this, and right. And so some of the, and so Heather talks about time. I wish we had more time. I wish we would have had 9 months to put all this stuff together and think about all the possibilities and all the things we need to communicate to the public, because we're finding these things out. It's like an onion, right? It keeps smelling worse and worse as we peel back each layer. And turns out our tenders can vote. We can register our wildland trucks because they're 19, and our ladder trucks, they're 19 as well. That's the average age of our ladder trucks.
That's the kind of stuff you need to hear. Because how many of them drive a pickup that's 19 years old?
Yeah. It's, our ambulances, even with the addition of 3 new ambulances within the last 18 months, the average age of our ambulances is 10 years old. And that's adding 3 units in the past 18 months. So,
and that's usually considered past their service life.
Right. That's where you retire them, is 10, that's way, on an ambulance, that's way past, right? Yeah. So, engines is 15 years old, and 10 years is how long they stay in service. So it's been interesting. There's so much to get out. And COVID is immensely frustrating. And I hear you, Commissioner Bossman. I think that's one of the things that Commissioner Ansel and I heard loud and clear on Monday night, was that there is a good 30 or 40% of people that are just going to vote no, because the word tax is included in anything.
Yeah.
And what I said to the group was that's okay. I'm here to talk to, reasonable community members that want to listen about what's going on with the fire service in their community. I'm not here to talk to Democrats or Republicans.
Right.
And if we can't get, if someone can't get past which way they vote, then that's not who we're talking to. We need
You're not gonna get
people
to
that are,
it anyway then. So,
yeah, we need to talk to the community, not to a political party.
Right.
I would
Well,
only
how-
add that we do have some stuff in the FAQs that talks about options, what will happen if it doesn't pass, to sort of say, we'll do this, we'll do that. These might be implications for you. And I would also say that if any of the commissioners want to take another look at this updated round of the FAQs and see if anything jumps out at you that we should be talking to that we're not, or if it seems too dark, let us know. We're always making sure we run everything past legal so that we are staying on the right side of the line of education, not advocacy. And that's very important, and we'll continue to do that. But we are in a tough spot, a really tough spot, and we want to make sure people can't credibly say, you didn't tell me it was this bad. It's this bad, and we're trying to let them know. And I would also just finally add that anything that each of the commissioners can do in terms of personal contacts is probably some of the most impactful stuff that can happen in this whole thing. I mean, the union is huge in making this go, but you are the community leaders, the people who they voted for. They will look to you and say, what the heck's going on here? And be proactive and educating your friends and neighbors. I would say if you can make that time, it's well worth it, and there's no substitute for it.
yeah, be like Kimberly.
All right. Anything else on the lid lift? When can we expect that flyer to go out?
The flyer will be going to the printer within the next week or week and a half, like by the 27th at the latest, it's at the printer. So if anybody wants to see a draft of the mailer, let us know. We'll let you see it next week. The FAQs will go up on the website. Again, there's some now there, I believe, and they're going to get revised. And we're just keeping updating them as the onion gets peeled. And then the mailer that we're designing now and finalizing will get mailed out on or around the 13th of October, which is the same day that ballots are mailed out. The goal is to have the mailer land in your mailbox the same day that you get your ballot.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if that stuff can get forwarded to us for a quick review, I'd certainly appreciate it. So whether
Absolutely.
it goes to Jenny or the chief and gets sent to the board, I think we all owe it to ourselves in the district to take a look at that and make sure that there's nothing that catches our eye. And each one of us has a different perspective. I'm and Scott are fortunate to live in the communities that overwhelmingly passed the measure. Kimberly and Rich are in the overwhelmingly didn't pass it. So I'm sure your perspective is different than mine. And
Very helpful.
we need to hear that
Yeah.
and see that.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm hoping that maybe Jason, you and Jenny, Heather and I can put our heads together on some of those last little stuff that we've been batting around this morning and get that out this afternoon. But I think it will take one more conversation between the staff gang here.
Okay.
And then we'll ship it to commissioners, and would love your feedback.
Thank you. Thanks for your work on this. We want this one to pass.
You wanted the last one to pass, and we really
Way ahead of you.
All right. Next item is contract for services with District 4. Just as a review, their contract expires the end of this year. We have had discussions with their board chair about a one-year renewal contract, and it's my understanding that we are probably a week to 10 days-ish from being able to have that meeting with budget numbers. I think it's our opinion, our legal opinion, that we stick with pretty much the same contract language that is in existence today. with the addition of clarification on the payment piece. So Chief, is there anything else? I know that you and Benita have been working, and the rest of the staff, on those final numbers. We're still waiting for numbers from agencies that we have no control over.
Right.
But we may just have, I mean, I'd kind of like to get this rolling as we move into budget season too.
Yep, we're getting to the point where we're just going to need to make our own assessment and move forward with you know, and LNI is really one of the bigger ones. But I did, at the District 4 Commissioner meeting on Monday, I did talk about that we would, you know, it's been advised that we just use the same language for the most part and focus on the payment portion. And while there was no vote, and I can't speak for the District 4 board, they seemed amenable to that. They understood the rationale behind that there's no sense in spending a lot of time to have two sets of attorneys recraft a 1 year, hopefully a 1 year agreement, that we would continue with what we've been using for a decade and, you know, make some minor improvements to that document as opposed to redrafting something new. So.
All right. Any questions from anyone else on the board on that? Nope. All right. Law enforcement response, that's another moving target. I was reading through the minutes last month, and there were two things that were going to happen. The Fire Commissioners Association was going to draft a letter to the governor. I don't know. Was there any talk of that at their meeting, Kimberly? You're on.
I know. I was trying to find it.
Yeah.
They did talk a little bit about it. I know they're working on that. And then they also said that the chiefs are also had sent a letter to Inslee.
Okay. And then I
think it's
going to write a letter on behalf of our board, or Jenny and I were going to write that.
discussion.
Jenny's going to write it. I'm going to review it. Are you guys okay with that? If we draft and ship off a letter as well? Actually, no, this isn't the one I'm talking about. I think that was the EMS one, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, this is it. All right. So this is the law enforcement response letter. This one is a letter to Whatcom County EMS asking for them to add a critical response unit to help absorb some of this additional 1,000 calls that we potentially could get based on law enforcement not responding. So does anyone on the board have any objection to our board drafting and sending a letter to Whatcom County EMS asking for their support for some staffing of that unit?
No.
All right, we'll get that done and get it sent out. Sorry, we're kind of we're dancing with a couple letters here. One is the COVID one, and one is the law enforcement response. It's nice that these things all hit at the same time.
I was just going to say that I think I overlapped in talking to you because there were so many different conversations about vaccines and COVID and law enforcement. And
yeah, it's getting somewhat overwhelming to have so many big issues that are impacting our service level all at the same time. All right.
Chairman Ansel.
Yes.
Today in today's operations meeting, Mike Hilly, who's in charge of the Whatcom EMS conglomerate, whatever you want to call it nowadays, spoke in depth about a chase vehicle, but the way he alluded to it, he's not even looking at anything that potentially could be on the road this year. He was even kind of alluding to possibly 2 years from now of being able to get something up and running. And so, you know, I don't know if it's really on there. I think it's important a good letter from our board and other boards, get these guys moving a little faster than, dragging along for another 2 years to see kind of what'll happen with the law enforcement side of things. So
Right.
just heads up.
Yeah, thank you. I think we just need to let them know that it is impacting us now. And 2 years from now, it's not acceptable in my mind, but I appreciate that input.
If I could rant for a second, COVID changed our personnel's response to things overnight, and House Bill 1031 has done the same. For bureaucrats to say it's going to take us a couple of years to react doesn't carry much water with me.
Yeah.
I need to move faster for my people, and so I'm going to ask the board to write a strongly worded letter like my grandpa used to write, and see if we can and keep doing it, because our people on the floor, the ones that are actually delivering the service, they are pivoting overnight. They're doing it with no direction, no training, no nothing. They're just figuring it out on the fly. And we need to be better than that. We have to.
Fair enough. I appreciate your passion and support for your personnel, and it's our responsibility to get that message out. So I will work on that in the next day and see if we can't get something out. Facilities, my oh my, I just looked at some really newly painted doors at Delta and at 72, and I could have sworn that they just bought brand new doors. They did such a wonderful job on them. So thank you, Chief, and Chief Ward, for finding us a contractor that has gone above and beyond my expectations in making these doors look brand new.
And the kudos goes to Chief Ward on this. He has been the driver of this and has been kind of doggedly chasing down people, and the gentleman he found has done an exceptional job. And so thank you, Chief Ward.
Yeah, it looks great. And it's my understanding that there was some work done that was outside of the bid, and I just want the board to know that this guy has gone above and beyond to make this job look right, and was willing to basically donate his time and money to do some things that he really didn't bid to do. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we compensate him for, painting that extra trim that actually finishes the job that wasn't originally in the plan. So there's probably going to be a minor cost overrun, but I think in the big picture of things, the quality of work and the dedication that this guy has shown is certainly deserving of us compensating him for his time and efforts. Is that fair enough to say, Chief?
Absolutely.
All right. No surprises. All right. In our packet, and as long as we're on station, sorry, before we leave that, Semiahmoo Station, I went by there the other day. Kudos to the crew at Birch Bay that were out there again, mowing and blowing and taking care of the daily stuff. That place hasn't, even they said the place hasn't looked that good in over 10, 12 years. It really turned out nice. So thanks to everyone that came out and donated their time, and to the company that picked up our parking lot full of trimmings. And actually, I think did a little more professional spruce up of some of the shrubbery after we took chainsaws to it also. I was impressed. It looks good.
Commissioner Ansel, could I add one more thing here?
Yep.
I want to make the commissioners aware that the training tower at 63 has been blocked off from use by personnel. Chief Ward and I went out there at the request of a couple captains and made an assessment. That structure is not safe. There's some definite flaws in. It appears that water's been getting into the bricks. When the couple of the crews peeled back some trim on the windows, we were able to see that the bricks are hollow. They're not full thickness, and they are tied in with rebar. So it was probably constructed according to code when it was constructed, but water has got in there. It appears it's been getting in for years, and through freeze thaw cycles, we now have what I consider to be a pretty weak corner. Like a dummy, I pushed on it and it flexed while we were inside the building. So then we decided that now we're just going to shut this thing down. So we have a structural engineer coming out to take a look at it. We did find an old report from 2017 that it had been inspected prior, and it looks like they had said, yeah, you can use it, but this needs to be replaced within a year. I don't know where that report ever ended up. We had to call the engineer that did the inspection back in 2017 to find it. But for now, that if you don't see any training happening in that tower, if you don't see anything going on, that thing is, yeah, we put yellow tape around it, so we don't want anybody to get hurt. So that is, we just high-fived over a couple of facilities things, but unfortunately, like I said, it's an onion.
Which just continues to highlight the dire straits we are in as a district overall, with, I mean, literally the walls falling down around us. So, thank you for shutting that thing down. We certainly don't want anyone getting hurt there, but it just highlights how messed up our stuff is up here right now. So in your packet is a letter to the governor from the chief and myself. I wanted the board's feedback input. It is basically requesting that they sort of reconsider this mandate of making everyone get vaccinated. Chief, do you want to hum a few bars on this one?
Yeah, it's not so much not mandating people to get vaccinated, but that we are very fortunate in North Wacom to have like I said, our FTEs are going to have 100% compliance by the deadline, and that's wonderful for us. But every district around us does not, and if they lose full-time employees, if they lose responders, whether they're paid or volunteer, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. If they lose responders, the calls are still going to happen, and we're going to still respond to them as a fire service collectively here in Whatcom County, and that could affect our department. If we're fully staffed and everybody else is not, then we're gonna go. And I guess in my words in the letter is that I think this mandate in some ways is creating the emergency that he was trying to avoid. The governor was trying to avoid by having legions of responders out sick or inpatient in the hospital. Well, now we've excluded them from working because we've made it so restrictive when they've been working for 18 months and wearing their PPE and wearing their masks. And I believe in the state of Washington, there's been one recorded emergency responder to citizen passage of COVID-19. So the troops, no matter where they are, Whatcom County, King County, Walla Walla County, are doing the work to keep themselves, their families, and the public safe. And to just come up with an arbitrary date where you have to have this thing where you can't do your job anymore really is really bad for the system. And those, like I said, that's great that we have everybody, we're going to have everybody vaccinated or, underneath the guideline, the deadline, but it's going to put a burden on our system and a burden on our taxpayers. And I am asking him to rethink what he decided to do.
So I have got a co-signature spot on this, and I just wanted to make sure that the board was okay with us sending off that letter. Scott, are you okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Kimberly?
Yes, I agree. It's very well written.
Rich?
Yeah, I think if nothing else, it puts it on the record what our position is. I don't expect any response from it, but at least it's quoted and it's public.
All right, fair enough. We'll get that signed today. Thank you. New business. We have a proclamation 2114 COVID vaccine requirement. There's a draft resolution, a lot, there was that proclamation from the governor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's only 9 pages. If you had a chance to digest that. With that is a draft resolution 2021-06. I'm going to ask that we have a motion to approve resolution 2021-6, and then we can discuss it and decide if we want to move forward or not.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
So the resolution is to sort of fall in line with all of these legal requirements that were outlined for us by Mr. Rufato earlier, especially in the case if because we received funds in the form of GEMT, that we would be in violation of a federal mandate, which would then result in penalties and bad things to the district. This basically says that we're going to comply. And then there comes on the heels of that a department policy which sort of, outlines how we're going to manage this. The policy, in my opinion, is here for our review and not in its finished format because it hasn't really been vetted by labor yet as to what the impacts might be. And there's been a couple of suggestions from our legal team as to, compensation. And I think you heard Mr. Rufato refer to compensating people for the time. I mean, if you're requiring, if we're mandating that they do something, then we should probably have to be on the hook to compensate them for their time when they go do that. So that part hasn't been worked out, but the resolution is basically saying, yes, we're going to comply, and the policy is how we're going to comply, but that one's not finished yet. Chief, am I out of line here, or is that?
Nope, not at all. I wanted to give the commissioners, I wanted to make sure that the policy was approved to be looked at by the commissioners before I gave it to labor, because I wanted to get everything in the right order. So,
but I mean, as far as our approving the resolution, am I correct in saying, look, if we don't follow this mandate?
Oh, sorry. Yep.
But
correct.
On both pieces, the resolution itself would put us at risk by not saying that we're going to comply. Fair?
We could be considered non-compliant, correct?
So
where it puts us certainly at risk.
it doesn't necessarily say we agree with what's happened here, but it does say that we're sort of required to comply here.
We have received and understand the mandate.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's more what it says, is that we understand these are the instructions that have been given to us, and we will comply because
Okay.
these are the instructions.
All right, and then how we comply will be in our district policy, which is in draft form and still in negotiations.
Correct.
All right, so any questions or concerns? We have a motion to approve that resolution 2021-06. Does anyone else have any questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of resolution 2021-06?
All right.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. And then again, the district policy talks about that, and talks about accommodations, and talks about what if you don't comply, and talks about potential compensation. And if you have any input or questions or concerns about that, please direct those to Chief Vanderveen. How's that for passing it over, Chief? Is that good?
Sounds good.
All right. All right. And just FYI, our attorneys had a big part in drafting these policies. It's not something that neither I or the chief or anyone else here in the office had the gumption to sit down and write. So
So the religious belief exemption is different than the state one. Is that going to be an issue, or does it matter?
I hate to say it keeps changing, but it kind of keeps changing. And we may just have to say that we will use, that's a good, I'll ask Mr. Davis, but a better choice may be to say that we will use the current state approved religious exemption form instead of ensconce one in policy and then have it turn out to be the wrong form.
Yeah, because the state one specifically asks if you have ever had a vaccination.
Right. I know and that's the problem, sir, is that they keep moving the goalpost around and changing the form, and so it's hard to keep up with what. So I think I'll ask Mr. Davis if we can just include verbiage as opposed to including the actual form.
all right. So I guess that handles our policies and procedures for the month. Correspondence was in your packet. Obviously, there were several letters from citizens requesting non-mandates for vaccinations. Thank you to those folks who took the time to send us their opinions on that.
And we've been taking numerous phone calls as well.
Okay.
Are these letters responded to?
I've responded to the, most of them are just emails. I have not responded to the emails. The phone calls I've responded to, taking time to chat with everybody.
The open house for the Haney Fire Station, I thought was just a historical document that was interesting. Retired deputy chief from Bellevue, whose grandmother lives on Valley View, for whatever reason, had this in his pile of stuff. And he thought that I would get a kick out of it. So we threw it in there to let you see what things cost way back then. I thought it was pretty good. Next board meeting. Okay, so we have, we've got some conflicts going on for our next board meeting. The Fire Commissioners Conference is going on then. And so we need to pick probably a better date than the 21st. So I believe Scott and Kimberly and John are all gonna go to that conference. And so I know that typically if we go back too far, our vouchers and stuff aren't able to be prepared. So could we potentially be looking at the 19th for a meeting? Chief, I'm kind of deferring to you a little bit.
My schedule's pretty easy, sir. I work at your pleasure. So it'd be the commissioners that you need to consult with.
Just wanted to make sure you didn't have, you know, some big event planned that I didn't know about.
Not that I'm seeing.
All right.
19th looks good for me.
It works for
Kimberly?
me.
19th works for me as well.
And Rich, yes, you said?
Yes,
So I assume then we have to call this a special meeting, right? Because it's outside of our adopted schedule. I know Jenny's not,
She's a few seconds behind, so she's not gonna probably pop up and answer. She's nodding her head. Yep. Yes, it would be a special meeting.
all right, but 1019 is the one, I guess we'll wait for maybe Crawford, but is 1 PM still a viable time for everyone?
mhm.
Yes. All right, we'll check with Crawford and see how that works with his new bus schedule. The next meeting, I guess we're still be talking about the levy lid lift. Contractor services we'll still be talking about. I don't know, the law enforcement, we could keep that on there, chief. Facilities, are we good to drop that one now?
We should be
Or
able
do we
to.
need we'll probably need an update on that tower though, won't we?
The tower and yeah, yep, there's the update will be good.
So we'll hold that for the tower. That letter is done. And then I guess we may take another look at the COVID-19 policy by then.
Yes.
We might have something on that. All right, anything else? Karen and Heather, any final comments before we leave?
Please talk to your neighbors.
Talk to your neighbors, think good thoughts.
All right, we'll get the local fired up.
Yeah, go union. Yeah, go local.
All right. Documents, of course, we're back to the stop by and sign documents again. If there's nothing else, I will ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Okay.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned 2:25 PM. Thanks, everyone.